Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. Today we have, I said that we were done with our series of debates, and then actually we had a request to do another debate. This time in a legislative race in Fargo Area District 10, which you've noticed I've been writing about District 10 a lot. I think it's actually the race to watch, certainly one of the races to watch in North Dakota's legislative races across the state. I think it's an important one. Is bellwether the right word for it? I don't know. I think it's certainly an interesting one. One of the few competitive races really in the state, District 10, both on the House side where we have a Democratic incumbent and a Republican incumbent, Representative Hamida Dakane, the Democrat, and Representative Steve Swantek, a Republican. They are the incumbents. And then we have a challenger, Jared Hendricks, who's a Republican running in that race. And it's kind of interesting because Hamida Dakane and Steve Swantek like each other a lot. And they're almost kind of running together. In the Senate race, though, in North Dakota, and I know our audience knows this, but sometimes people get a little confused about it. When a legislative district is up, there are 2 open House seats, and the 2 top vote getters get to sit in those seats. Running alongside that is a Senate race where it's just 1 seat, and you have candidates competing for that 1 seat, and that's who we're going to be talking about today. The incumbent in District 10 is Senator Ryan Braunberger, and the challenger is Republican George Roughead. They are both joining us today, and we're going to talk and we're going to have a debate, which I think in a lot of ways will be illustrative of the sort of debates that are happening in these legislative races across the state. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. And Ryan, I'm going to start with you, and I like to start all these debates. You're the incumbent. You've been in the legislature. Why should the voters of District 10 give you another term?
Well, I think it was only a short term. It was only really 1 session because I was elected in 22. So I really haven't had a lot of opportunity to actually do a lot. I think I was a very good voice for my district because I knew its district is very diverse. And it's important to make sure that we continue to have diverse discussions within that district. I did do plenty of good things. Like I was advocating a lot for childcare, and I helped push through some of the legislation for increasing access to childcare across the state. I work very good across the aisle and advocate for the people of it. I mean, being one of only 4 Democrats in the Senate we have to work across the aisle to get anything across. I think I want to continue to do more work, and I think I would be honored to serve another 4 years so that I can continue to work on those messages and getting childcare, helping every citizen in the state of North Dakota, fighting against any hatred towards any segments of the society that was happened in the last legislative session, and making sure that we have economic development and opportunities for every North Dakota.
George, a similar question to you. Why should the voters of District 10 move on from Senator Braunberger and elect you?
Yeah, so the reason I'm running, primarily as a teacher, I'm seeing a lot of problems in our education system. I'm seeing poor policy. I'm not really seeing a financial issue as far as not having enough money. I'm seeing it poorly spent. So I think they could use kind of a feet on the ground perspective in the legislature. The Senate doesn't have any active teachers in there right now. So my priority right there would be making sure that in education policy, we're spending our money in an appropriate way and making sure that it's effective and actually reaching the students and the teachers where it belongs. I think right now Fargo is struggling with kind of safety issues, law and order. People don't feel safe in their neighborhoods. They don't feel safe in their homes. And I'd like to see the state legislature step up a little bit more and help the cities kind of take care of those issues, because without order, without law, it's really hard for people to be productive in the way they should. And similar to Ryan, we do see eye to eye on some things. Most things we don't. But as far as childcare, making sure that kids, for example, are having lunch at school, making sure that they're safe, that they're warm in the winter and cool in the summer or spring, just making sure that they can learn their best and make sure they have a good, healthy environment. I think that's a focus for District 10. I think people care about that. It's a lot of young people and a lot of young families.
George, you brought up education. You mentioned you're an educator. You educate at Capstone Academy, which is a private school in Fargo. It's going to come as no surprise to anybody on this call that the issue around private schools funding from the state is going to be an issue next session. I want to ask a pretty pointed question of you, George, and then the same to Ryan. If public dollars go to a private school, either directly from the state or through an education savings account, should that private school have to abide by the same rules as public schools around accountability, around accepting all students, around keeping all students and providing all the services? So the question for you is, Capstone is getting money either directly from the state or through an ESA. Should they have to play by the same rules as public schools?
Yeah, probably, which is why, I don't really represent Capstone. I'm not a lobbyist, or I'm an employee.
Understood.
Teacher.
I shouldn't have said Capstone or any other private school. I apologize.
Yeah. So right now, just addressing that point, though, I would say that money is not the primary issue when it comes to the private schools. In fact, we wouldn't really want it. What we want is change in regulation. So it'd be the opposite of what you're saying, because it's also a Christian school. So if we're getting public money now that mission would be in question at some points, depending on what the topic is. And so that's not really the direction. But when you talk about school choice, I think the right thing for the people of District 10 and for Fargo, it can mean a lot of things besides private schools. So I'm more in favor of taking things like a public charter route, where I think you really get the best of both worlds for people who want that. You can have schools that are independent, that have some more leeway. They can be flexible and fit what students and what families want. And they also still have the funding. They still have to abide by all the same rules. They have to take everyone. But it really lets people fit what they want for their kid in that model. So as far as school choice, I think people conflate it with, like you're kind of saying, taking money out of the public system and just injecting it into only private schools. And I don't think that that's what the programs are. I don't think with the ESA, I don't think that's the direction it's heading. I think it's smaller steps than that. I don't think it's a defunding of the public school system in any way.
Okay, just to be clear, what I'm asking, if the money is to go to private schools, should the private schools have to apply by the same rules as public schools?
Yeah, probably. And that's why private schools in general, I don't think, want it.
Ryan, same question to you.
Thank you very much, Chad. I 100% agree. I think that if private schools do receive taxpayer-funded money or through these grants programs, they do need to abide by the same rules as the other schools, because we need a level playing field for every student. Every student should have the same education across the board. I agree. What I struggle with when we start putting voucher programs on the aspect is two things. One, I don't believe that public dollars should go to ideologies. So specific ideologies shouldn't be part of that, because we need to have a separation of church and state, and we need to make sure that we have a separation completely. The second aspect is that I don't want these vouchers to also continue to enrich the wealthy, that gives dollars to people that already can afford those classes, that already are sending these individuals to private schools. If we do a voucher program, it needs to be equitable, and it needs to be given to people that can afford those other choices today. So I think it's very important that those voucher programs are gone to equity to everybody. So yes, I do agree that if we do send public dollars to private schools, that those private schools have to have the same exact standards as the public school system. They do have to abide by it 100%. They do have to accept every student, because today private schools don't accept every student. And oftentimes those are picked up by the public schools, because the public schools have to accept every student. And that even goes in regards to homeschooling as well. If we do send it to homeschoolers, those homeschoolers may not have all the resources available to them at that homeschool level. And the public school system may have to pick up those things, like for special education, an aspect that aren't equipped for at the homeschool level. So I think it's very important that we be very careful when we go into the voucher type programs, that we don't, that it supplements our public school system and does not take away from our public school system.
Staying on
Can we circle back? Well,
Sure.
so the thing, my answer wasn't really addressed as far as public charters. So does Ryan have anything to say about public charters?
Yeah, I think public charters is an interesting aspect to it, except for I don't think it's viable for the state of North Dakota, because North Dakota is a very rural state. And I don't think it is something that can be done in a way that is equitable to every student. Sure, we live in the metro, we live in Fargo, so we have an opportunity to have lots of different school programs all over the state, but that's not going to be best for every student in the state of North Dakota. We need to be, when we're in the legislature, we need to look beyond just our own districts. We need to look at it, the whole entire state, because yes, we represent people in our district, but we don't want to make a system so that the students in Fargo have an advantage over districts in my hometown of Christine, North Dakota, which they could travel to Fargo every day, because that's only 20 minutes away. But what about places like out west, where it's 50, 60, 70 miles before you can get to a charter school?
Just staying on the topic, if we're done with that one, staying in the vein of education, I know you both made reference to the school lunch issue. That was certainly a big topic of debate in the last, and I just want to get a little specific on that. What does it mean? And we'll start with the incumbent, Ryan. Obviously, you just went through a legislative session where you cast some votes on some school lunch and debated in committee some school lunch policies. What would North Dakota's school lunch policy look like if it were up to you? What would we do?
If school lunch policy, I say we would have school lunches free for every child, regardless if it's public, private, or anything like that. I think I'm okay with that. One of the aspects is that it would right now, families are struggling every day with the cost of everything. If we can eliminate one cost from them for ongoing, because you got a lot of people that already have free and reduced lunch. It wouldn't necessarily affect them as much, but even your middle class students that don't qualify for those low and reduced lunch programs, we can eliminate hundreds of dollars a month or a year from their budget that they can put elsewhere in probably necessities like rent or mortgage or food or meals outside of the school system. So I think it's important that we provide access to school meals to every child. I even would propose breakfast and lunch, because then we can we would eliminate a lot of stress on the families today, because there's a lot of stress on families today.
George, same question to you. What would a school lunch policy look like if you were designing it?
Yeah, as far as the policy, I'm with Ryan on providing the lunches. What I get nervous about, and this is where the devil's in the details, is if you're providing that from the state and you only have one company or two companies who are providing those meals to the schools or whatever gets made in the cafeteria, you start to have, state funding and a limited amount of people who are willing to provide for that contract. And what's to stop them from gouging up year after year? So as far as the policy, you'd probably have to tie it to CPI. You'd probably have to tie it to something to make sure that the $3 million that right now it would take to fund the lunches doesn't turn into 6 and then 12 and then 24 in 10 years or 20 years. And that's the problem. That's the problem with the funding. So I'd like to get it done, but we really have to make sure, once again, that the policy doesn't make it a blank check for whatever company is providing the service to the school.
Staying sort of, we're going to move to taxes. Rob, I always struggle with who I should start with these questions, because I feel like the way we do this is all your questions are to Ryan and then all my questions are to George. So I'm going to mix it up and I'm going to go to Ryan with this one. Obviously, property taxes. We have Measure 4 on the ballot. So I want your opinion on Measure 4. And then I want your opinion on, if it goes down, what do you think should happen next session to alleviate the pressure? I mean, people are frustrated with property taxes. There's no doubt about that. So how do you feel about Measure 4? And then what should we do about property taxes? And then George, same question to you when Ryan's done.
Well, property taxes, obviously, it's important, the $1 million question or whatever, $60 million question it is. I am not for the property tax bill because it's short-sighted. It provides a huge gap in our budget that we'll have to fill right away on day one. And I think it'll monopolize our time at our next session because it's about just over $3 billion a biennium that we'll have to figure out how to come up with. We have the money to do it, but we only have the money to do it for maybe one, maybe two, maybe three bienniums, and then we're going to really struggle with finding funds at that point. I think, yes, I believe that a lot of the people are starting with property taxes, but one thing I do hear when I'm at the doors is not necessarily property taxes, but special assessments. Special assessments are almost as much or more than some of the property taxes that are out there. And the way the measure is drafted, it will not affect special assessments. Cities will still be able to do special assessments. So is it really going to help the citizens of North Dakota that are specially assessed for projects? No, and it's probably not going to help as much for them. The other aspect is I think that eliminating property taxes is also going to benefit a lot of out-of-state people that have properties in the state of North Dakota. Like, for instance, both George and I are renters. It's not going to necessarily affect us as renters because some of the properties that are owned in this area are not North Dakota citizens. So we're really giving away money to out-of-state residents, and we're not benefiting North Dakotans either. I think that answers your question.
But what should we do next session?
Oh, what we should do next session? I think
the easy part of it, Ryan. The easy part of it.
Yeah, that I think we definitely need to really take a really good look at how political subdivisions actually levy taxes. We could look at possibly putting caps on how they do them. I think also we need to take a look at whatever we have a surplus in our budget that we should be really actively looking at getting the money back to the citizens. We did pass a tax credit the last session. I think we had some holes in that tax credit last session that need to be corrected because there are several people that didn't qualify because for one reason or another, their house was in a trust that wasn't in their name, so they didn't qualify for it. It could be that that's how they just did it. They're still a resident of North Dakota. They still live there, and they still deserve a tax credit. I think anytime we have an excess, which I think we're at just over $700 million in excess, that we should be looking hard at giving those citizens directly back to the citizens because it works tenfold. Whenever we give money back to the people to spend it, we get tax dollars back on that as well through different means. So I think those are the things that we need to really look at next session.
George, same question to you. Your opinion on Measure 4 and what do we need to do on property taxes?
Yeah, so I'm with Ryan on this one for slightly different reasons. Some of the reasons are the same, but I think right now people are getting kicked around, and we need to listen to them that they're saying that they can't deal with all these taxes. For example, in Fargo, they're also going to be voting on a convention center, the Fargo Dome, all this other stuff. There's sales taxes on top of this. And so they're saying enough already. And so I'm for local control, but some of the local control has been less responsible than the others. And I don't think it's a good idea to start taking the money and concentrating it in Bismarck. So it's even more money in the hands of fewer people. I think maybe there's some people who would benefit from that, but I just don't think it'd be good governance. But we did look at reforming the system because right now it goes up. You can't have 10% increases every single year and expect for that to be sustainable.
So what do we do then, Ryan? Like in terms of policy, if you were to be elected to the Senate, what sort of reform? And really, I guess this is my additional question on top of Chad's is the legislature has done a lot on property taxes. The thing is I think maybe most of us would agree. I think most North Dakotans would agree. A lot of it's been ineffective. When we have tried to buy down property taxes with credits, it seems, or whether it's credits or, we've taken over more education funding. We took over social services spending. We've done a lot of that. And what happens is that is not filled. We were moving that stuff to the state budget. But property tax bills are remaining stubbornly high. So what do we do? And Ryan, I'm going to come back to you again with this. What do we do that's not just the state spending more on locals? What do we do to make sure that those local bills aren't going to continue to rise as we move more and more local spending into the state budget?
That perfect question. It's a hard question because the state doesn't have a lot of control over what local municipalities do. I think one of the things we need to look at is providing caps on how much they can increase those property taxes year over year. I think that's where we need to do. We also need to look at there are some entities like your park boards that can do things without having voter control, without having voter insight, can raise those mills up to a certain point without having voters voting on it. I think we need to make sure that we have more say in that. And maybe we need to pass legislation that would require, if you're going to put forth a mill levy increase of any mill levy increase, that it requires a vote by the citizens of that region, of that area, which isn't required for some of the entities out there. Obviously, like your school boards and when they're doing these massive mill levy increases for property taxes, those have to require a 60% vote by the citizens themselves. I think we need to really look at legislation that does rein in those entities to make sure that they can't just continuously raise 5, 10, 20% every year, and making sure that the actual citizens of those entities have more say in when those taxes are raised.
George, same question to you. What in terms, how do we keep, aside from the state just shifting spending into the state budget, what sort of reforms do you think are necessary to try to keep property taxes in line at the local level?
Well, I think you put your finger on the problem that the state started subsidizing property taxes, and then we got surprised when they kept rising because we were footing the bill for it with the oil revenue. And so I don't think it should be a shock to anybody. And so what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to go to the locals and tell them, like, we're not paying for this stuff that you're saying that you want us to pay for. So you either have to stop subsidizing it, or like you said with the schools, if you're getting the money, then the person that gives you the money should have some say in how you're spending it. I don't think the cities would want that either. So at some point, the state has to make a decision. Are you going to pay for things and then tell them how to spend it? Or are you going to stop subsidizing it and let the costs come down naturally?
So shifting gears slightly, I think both of you in your answers to the first question reference children and the importance of making sure our children are fed and taken care of. Often I find with the legislature, because of the age of our legislators, that we don't talk enough about issues that are affecting working families, either with or without kids. But what does it mean to have childcare and paid leave and aging parents, all those kind of things. So George, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk a little bit, just sort of, what would your priorities be in terms of advocating for working families, maybe people under the age of 40, or I should be careful, I'm 48, people under the age of 50 who are dealing with childcare and aging parents and all those kind of things. What would you say to them? What are your priorities when it comes to advocating for their needs?
I just want to acknowledge that Chad moved the goalpost so he could include himself in the young families.
Yeah, it's in 10 years, it's going to be 58. I need people to be, anyway, George, for me and other young people like me, what are you going to do for us?
Yeah, so I think I get really careful when we talk about spending the money, subsidizing certain programs. I think, like we were just talking about with property taxes, we meant well, but we actually make more problems. I think really the idea is you keep the state as much out of the way as you can. We keep the economy humming the way it has been. You keep wages high. You keep unemployment low. All of those things have been happening. Now we've been having a spending problem on top of it. But as far as creating the environment for people to be successful, I think the state government's done its share in doing that, and it's up to the locals to kind of get the spending under control. If we didn't have local spending as high as it was, people wouldn't be talking about this. They wouldn't be talking about crises and housing and all these other things, because our wages are really high. And if you want a job, you can get a job. You can get to, it's not really a problem from the state government's end. So we're a little bit shifting, the symptoms and the diseases, we're shifting them from where maybe they were originating.
Ryan?
I think what I believe is we need to make sure that we have supports for all families. I think we need to make sure that we have access to childcare that is affordable to everyone. I believe in for childcare is for making sure we provide childcare for all our citizens so that families have the opportunity to work if they want to. Because right now people are choosing between working and having childcare because oftentimes childcare is more expensive for them for work. So I think I would like to push for the model it after New Mexico. New Mexico created a program that used some of their state land trust money and put it into a trust to help pay for early childhood education for our system for going forward. I think we can do that with our state school land trust program by taking a portion of that funds that we do spend on public K-12 education and use that fund to put more money towards childcare so that we can, and early childhood education to bring people in and allow families to make the right choice or make their choice that they want to be in the workforce or out of the workforce and help them do that. I think that's one step that we can do is making it easier for families to do their own by making it easier for them to get into affordable childcare. Other aspects to that is that I think we need to support our workers, making sure that we hold corporations accountable for their wages, making sure that they continue to do the high wages and make sure that we have the opportunity for them to unionize if they want to unionize, to be able to have negotiations and necessary for that. Because I think it is important that corporations are held responsible and make sure that they keep those high wages around because as soon as the economy returns, they're going to reduce those wages unless we hold them responsible and make sure that they continue to have a high working age. Right now, we have families in our community that are working 2, 3, and 4 jobs just to make ends meet. In the state, even with the high wages that we have, it's because there's a mismatch. There's a huge mismatch, and yet we have corporations that are making huge amount of profit margins and aren't passing those dollars onto the others. So we need to make sure that we hold that accountable and make sure that we keep those wages high, and that we need to make sure that we're helping families find childcare and have high quality childcare, because we've got high quality childcare that will help our K-12 system too, because we'll be able to identify items like learning disabilities so that we make sure that they move forward.
Hey, Rob, can I ask a follow-up on childcare before we go to you? George, in your answer, you referenced, the state sort of almost stay out of the way, keep the spending down, the economy humming. One of the issues I see with childcare is that it doesn't work because parents can't afford the cost, and the providers can't afford to pay their employees more. So there's a real lack of employees in childcare. Like, for example, when my son was in childcare, his teacher left to go be a barista because she could make more money there. And I felt like I was paying as much money as I humanly could to pay for that. I don't know how you fix that without some sort of government interventions to help subsidize some, because the free market doesn't work in that situation. What would you say to that? Like, how would you fix that problem? Because just the government staying out of the way, I don't know that that's actually a real solution to the problem childcare facilities are facing.
Yeah, so the wages right now for childcare workers, I think it's $11.50 per hour. Obviously that's not high enough to compete with any other job. So those wages, they're going to have to rise if they're going to want to find the workers and stuff like that. But I would disagree with you when you say that government's not heavily involved with the childcare already. So it's pages and pages of regulations and rules and things like that, and oversight and licensing and all of these other things. So that's one of the most heavily regulated industries, for the good of the children. But if we say that, government needs to do more, I think we're seeing the effects of that.
So Ryan, I'm gonna do a follow-up to you on childcare as well. I mean, are you concerned about the regulations that make sure the ratios of adults to children are in line? I've been to childcare facilities. I don't walk into that place and think, hey, you know what, this place could use is less adults. I worry when we start talking about...
I don't think that's what George was necessarily...
No, but I think when we start talking about removing regulations that protect children in order to make the... Am I misstating what the regulation?
Objection, Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor.
Let's let George clarify.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff actually has to do with facilities. So, you picked on something trying to make it sound like we should have 30 kids for every adult or something like that. A lot of the stuff has to do with making sure that the facilities, a lot of these facilities, if you want to convert like an office space, for example, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And so that's actually what's happening a lot of times in Fargo. The new childcare facilities that are popping up, when they were first built, they were like business spaces, office spaces, whatever, and they're being converted. A lot of that stuff is extra cost. So you need fire escapes and stuff, but there's a lot of things that they're very specific regulations saying certain things have to be certain heights and certain widths and whatever, and there's no wiggle room at all. So just making sure that things are kind of common sense, that they actually work for whatever building they're designed for, it helps people open up these businesses, because right now there's a lot of space available. Like in District 10, there's a lot of open spaces. You just can't use them for the shortage. You can't address the supply issue because you can't convert it the way you'd want to.
I appreciate that clarification. Ryan, anything you want to say about regulations?
Well, I think we have to be very careful about when we eliminate regulations, because we or restrict or reducing the regulations, we can get into the wild west. Because I think that's one of the things that we have in North Dakota, is because we have very light regulations compared to the rest of the country on a lot of things. And we also have some industries where we are leaders in the number of deaths in those industries because of all that regulation. So I think it's very important that we be very careful when we look at those regulations. I agree with George to a point that we need to maybe really seriously look at the building capacities and what they are, but we can't just put a childcare center in the middle of an industrial zone and say that's perfectly fine. No, we can't just say this is what's going to happen. We need to have guidelines for that in regards to that. I don't think regulations is the biggest hurdle. I think what it is the biggest hurdle is that daycare centers are maxed out at what they can charge parents in order for parents to be able to still afford to go there. And they are maxed out at what they can pay their employees in order to keep them there, because they can't, there's an imbalance. I think we need to really look at that childcare centers aren't a profitable business. It's just not. They should be part of our education system, and they should be looked at as an education system, which is more of a socialized aspect of it and not necessarily a profitable business. We also need to make sure that I think there's a lot of people that think that childcare centers are just daycare centers that don't do anything besides babysit. We need to really change that narrative, and we need to make sure that the childcare centers are actually professionals. A lot of the people that are working in these childcare centers have child development degrees. We need to pay them as those professionals. So we need to make sure that we are doing that. And I think that's where government comes into play, is that we need to make sure that we support those individuals. And that's why I think we need to set aside a trust and create a trust that will put money towards those programs, so we can keep those daycare centers open, keep them affordable for the children. I think we can do that in the state of North Dakota. We could provide childcare and early childhood education for every child.
What's interesting.
Everything that he said, though, creating land trusts, creating the government spending, paying them, all of that stuff was more spending, more subsidies, more taxes. All of it was putting gasoline on the fire, in my opinion.
I'm going to correct you on that, because we're not going to put more taxes, because it's already money that we already have and will continue to have for generations to come in the school land trusts. I'm not asking to increase taxes. This is stuff that we're having. We're going to take a portion that is going to K-12 system and gear it down to the early childhood education, the 0 to 5 generation.
And do you think the rest of the K-12 system is going to be able to withstand that?
I do, because we don't spend all the money today in the school land trusts. Of the 20% that we set aside for school land trusts, we can take a portion of it out.
Good back and forth, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Interestingly, my children actually went to a before and after school program here in Minot called CLC, which is kind of innovative, where it's childcare. There's an education component to it as well. It actually worked really good. I noticed that in the recent report that the governor's office just released from the school task force, one of the recommendations was clearing regulations to help more schools be able to do programs like that. So there is a debate to be had there, I think. Let's move on, though. I want to ask about something. The last legislative session, for lack of a better term, we spent a lot of time on culture war. And I guess maybe if we went down the list on this call, we don't have a different definition of what that means, but I think we all know what we're talking about. And I'll start with the challenger, George. Can you give us your philosophy on things like, the big debate we had over library bills, for instance, or transgender sports programs, or what have you? what is your general attitude? Give us a sense of how you feel about those things.
Well, in general, that stuff should be left up to the will of the people. As long as people's rights aren't being violated. The sensitive topic right here is that some people are claiming there's human rights. Some people are claiming these aren't human rights, and it's up for debate. That's what the war is about. I think most Americans would agree as far as, respecting people's rights, respecting their privacy, stuff like that. But people's rights are coming into conflict. For example, if you're mixing girls' sports and male athletes, both of them apparently have rights, and the rights are in conflict. I think unfortunately it's gonna come to the courts. I think it's gonna come to voting. But as far as the legislature, I think we represent our people and do the best we can to make sure that our people are happy, that they're getting what they want in whatever area that they're in. But a few times Ryan's mentioned that public things should be free of ideology. And I would say with a lot of these issues that aren't, crystal clear, they're not concrete, ideology comes into it and it plays a part. And to act like that you can be free of ideology when you're making these difficult decisions as far as, judging between people's rights and how far they each extend, I think that's where ideology comes into play. And to deny it is a little bit disingenuous.
Yeah, Ryan, I think George is right. I mean, sometimes I think the difficult things of these debates is sometimes we have groups of people that just don't agree on the fundamentals. So you obviously were serving in the legislature during a lot of those debates. Give us some insight into your attitudes about them.
I mean, it's hard. As an individual that is a part of that LGBTQ community, it was almost a personal attack at times. I think George is right. Ideologies are people's ideologies, and we need to be very careful on where we draw that line. But I think where we draw that line is my ideologies don't affect what you do in a daily life. And I think the laws that we create can't be done that prevent people from their pursuit of happiness. I think that's the biggest thing, is where that comes into play. I think some of the laws that we've tried to pass actually infringed on people's rights to their pursuit of happiness.
Give us some examples.
I would say the gender affirming care one. I think that is really preventing families from making their own medical decisions. I think you come down to the abortion rights one. That is also really preventing families from making their own personal decisions. I don't think government should be involved in any type of personal medical decisions. Those medical decisions should be from the families and their doctors and any spiritual advisor that they want to do. And all those rules that were being passed were all about ideologies, about Christianity. And it was an attack on people that don't necessarily believe the same as them. I have been fighting these type of things for all of my life. I have lived through Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where I was a child, and the Defense of Marriage Act, where I was told that who I am liking or who I want is abominable. Telling me that, leading to me even attempting suicide at one point, because I saw the world that I was being told that I am less than. That's why my voice is very important to the legislature, is to make sure that every North Dakotan is able to pursue their own happiness without government getting involved with it. I disagree wholeheartedly when people are advocating and saying that parents are forcing their children, or outside people are forcing their children to change their gender. That is not true. That just does not happen. Gender affirming care, like surgeries and stuff like that, does not happen for anybody under the age of 16 in the United States. Never happened, and it doesn't happen. Surgery does not happen unless it's for cancer or any of those other things. I think we really need to identify that children know who they are at a lot younger age than we think we do. I knew I was different when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, that I was not part of that norm. And I think we need to really recognize that children are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and that we need to make sure that we support them through their journey, that they are able to work through their journey and how they feel, and be supportive of them through that whole entire process, not encouraging them one way or another. Make sure that they can represent themselves how they want to be represented.
George, the senator, and by the way, Ryan, I am very glad you're still with us. George, he mentioned a couple of specific bills, the gender affirming care bill and the abortion bill. If you had been in the legislature at the time those bills had come up, do you want to tell us how you would have voted?
The gender affirming bill, I guess I'm with the parents, having custody of the child, having the rights of the child. So I'd side with them because sometimes, kids, they change their minds, they do things. I think having the parents there to guide them and kind of hold that final decision, I think that's what's going to make most people happy. Then you have the problem where the child and the parents don't agree. But I think in general, when you're making policies, you're trying to catch, as many situations as you can. And, no law is ever going to be perfect there. And, when we were talking about the sports thing, Ryan didn't really address it, but he's saying that they're under attack. And I think the miscommunication is that we view it as a defense when you have people who are playing sports together and sometimes there can be safety issues is the point. So it's not really, it's supposed to be an attack. It's supposed to be a defense of people and the spaces that are provided for them.
Let me get you specifically on the gender affirming bill and the abortion bill. How would you have voted? And then we'll let Ryan respond to some of that.
Well, I think I got the gender affirming one right. And then the abortion bill, as far as that one goes, it passed, right? And I think I would have been part of the people who voted for it.
Ryan, he mentioned, or I guess he referenced something you said about sports. You want to respond to that?
Yeah, the sports ban one, I voted against it, and I voted against it just in regards to, I think we need to leave it up to the entities that control those organizations. And the North Dakota High Schools Activity Association and even the NCAA has already said that they weren't going to allow students that are transitioning, that they wouldn't be able to play sports. There's one incident in the NCAA with the swimmer. I can't remember her name off the top of my head.
It's Leah Thomas, I think it was.
Yeah, Leah Thomas. That's what it is. She would not be able to perform. With current NCAA rules, she is no longer able to compete in those programs. So I think we need to let those organizations do their job. To rebut the aspect in regards to the gender affirming care one, the gender affirming care bill even eliminated parents' rights to be able to make those decisions for those children. So if you truly believe that parents should be making those decisions, we shouldn't be passing those laws altogether, because that even eliminated parents' rights to be able to help those children through those situations, because there are supporting parents that do that. And I think it's very important that we do have parents involved in those decisions, but we need to make sure that government doesn't prevent them from making those decisions.
George, I'll let you have the last word. I think you wanted to say something.
Well, as far as those organizations go, he's saying it's kind of a non-issue now, but it's only a non-issue because people spoke up. So I'm glad he's saying that the organizations got it right after there was an enormous amount of outrage for years.
So I think often with these issues related to culture wars, it's not necessarily the issue as much as who's making the decision, right? I mean, so the transgender athletes, the High School Athletics Association, book bans last session. I think that it was, we have a library board that can handle these, and school boards and those kind of things. So I guess my question for you, George, is, are you going to be somebody who's introducing bills around culture wars or pushing that sort of agenda next session? Or are you going to be somebody who wants a more focus on, the traditional tax and spend sort of conversations?
Yeah, so my focus the entire campaign, if you've been watching my ads and watching what I've been running, it's about teaching kids phonics, because we dropped that 30 years ago. There was a bill a couple of years ago that passed in the North Dakota House, and it hasn't gotten rolling through the system. So as a teacher, I'm concerned about math scores and reading scores. You guys asked questions about the culture war stuff, and then you got us going here. But that's not the thing I'd introduce. My focus, we only have 80 days, then a year off, and another 80 days. It's making phone calls and trying to get the schools teaching reading and math the way they did 30 years ago, which were actually higher. The scores have been declining for 30 years straight. And a lot of it is because of the methods that we've been using. And I don't want to bore the audience with that, but our educational theory for the last 30 years has been flawed. And I think we need to get back to the fundamentals.
Ryan, in terms of focus during the session, do you suspect you're going to be pushing, culture wars on the other side of things next session?
I don't. I think we need to get back to the basics. I don't want to fight any more culture war issues. I want to make sure that we are protecting every North Dakotan. I think Some of the cultural issues that are currently on the books are going to be working their way through the court system. And I would like to have them continue to work their way through the court system at this moment in time. With the only exception, I think that, obviously I will defend anything that comes through that makes sure that my community is represented and make sure that it's pushed back on. The only thing that I may do is I would like to see that we change our constitution that eliminates one man, one woman for marriage, just because I feel our Supreme Court may overturn that as it did with Roe v. Wade. And I want to make sure we protect the married citizens of North Dakota that still are married still will have their rights if the Supreme Court decides to take up that thing, because it has been rumored that will happen. So that's the only thing that I would like to work on. But I want to work on the same things that George wants to work on. I think we need to work on our education system. I think there are things that we do right in our education system that we need to just expand. We have great programs like at Northern Cass that they do very good things with student-led education. I think we need to expand those across the state. And I am working with our K-12 Coordination Council on a proposal to be able to expand those programs across the state so that we can make sure that we have actual real world experiences that kids have so that they are really prepared for the system. I do have to agree with George regarding when No Child Left Behind was put. That was a mistake that we did, and that really pushed our kids behind because we went to a standardized score system that really didn't take into real world experiences. And I think we need to really get back to the basics and make sure that we are doing those things correctly and preparing our kids for the future. I think we are working, and I think we have a great superintendent of public instruction that is really helping schools make their own decisions that are right for their own areas. And I think we need to continue to support that going forward. And we have a more of a hands-off approach for that, and making sure that they can make the right choices for that with some reporting. I also believe that we need to work on housing and those type of aspects of it to make sure that people stay in their house and are able to afford homes. Those are the things that I want to work on. I don't really want to work on cultural issues.
Staying a little bit on that theme of the cultural issues, I think that they are a manifestation of a very divided society right now. And so you two, Ryan, you've obviously been serving in the Senate. George, you aspire to serve there. Serving there, I don't need to tell either of you, I think, is it's where the rubber meets the road, right? You're almost sort of locked in a room with all these people who have differing points of view, and you are obliged to work together. And in many ways, you're working on bills that you are required by law to pass. You have to pass something. You have to find a way to work it out. So, George, I'll start with you. What is your philosophy? Have you thought at all about how you're going to navigate this very fraught, very divided place to work with with someone like Ryan, who I think agrees with you in a lot of ways on what the problems are and maybe differs quite a bit on what the solutions are. How are you going to work in this environment?
Well, there were several times in this conversation where Ryan and I had said we agreed with each other. I think that's a great start. There was even the one about childcare where at the end, I think it was Chad that said there was a combination of folding it into the schools and dealing with regulations to allow that to happen. So there's a lot of room where through the talking and through working things out, we can actually get things done. It's not always everything that needs to get done, but you can move it forward a little bit at a time. And if people have been paying very close attention, there's a lot of things that all of us agree on. There's things that are hard to find compromise on, but that's what the voting is about. Eventually somebody's going to win. It's pretty rare to have a tie. But you try to compromise, you try to move things forward, you try to get something that, makes people mostly happy. You're never going to make everyone happy all the time. But that's what the process is you're just trying to find some common ground and move things forward just a little bit.
Ryan, same question to you. And obviously, one of the two people who currently serve in District 10 in the House have obviously demonstrated a great deal of affinity for one another, despite being of different parties. And not to say that you haven't done the same, but what have your strategies been? What are your strategies going forward to work with people who at times disagree with you strenuously on issues that are at times very personal and very fraught?
I have great relationships with with the people that I serve with that are very, very right wing. One of the ones that I admire a lot, but we disagree fundamentally in a lot of things, is Yana Myrdal. But we work very well together in the Judiciary Committee. We have very good conversations. We will sometimes disagree, but sometimes she will moderate me and I will moderate her on some aspects of that where we agree on these topics. I think it's very important to have those conversations with individuals. And if it's very important to make sure that you build up. I spent the first session building those relationships with those individuals across the aisle, and I want to continue to build those relationships. It's very hard. That first session is very hard. And especially for me, I was put into the fire because I was also I was made the caucus chair because I'm a caucus of 4. So I was actually in leadership right off the bat.
It's tough to be a Democrat right now. There's 4 of you. You got a lot of ground to cover.
So it was very much, I learned a great deal that first session, but I still have a lot more to learn. And we need to when you get in there, you think you know what things are, but you don't. You have no idea how government works. You have no idea how it is until you're actually in the fire and know what it is to pass laws and how it is to have these conversations. You're not going to know all the answers right away. You're going to rely on lobbyists because they are going to have more insight into what's going on, and you're going to be fed hundreds of bills right off the bat. I mean, we already have record number of bills submitted to our legislative council. We did over 900 bills last session. I expect that we're probably going to do over 1,000 this time. So we're going to be working 10, 12, 14-hour days every day for 80 days. We're not going to be able to research every subject. We're not going to be able to read every bit of research. But I think with me already being there once before, I've already built those relationships. I already built those connections that I will be able to continue that work going forward. And I think it's going to be easier for me to continue that work going forward than somebody new. So I think because it takes a good first session to be able to build those relationships in order to work forward on that.
So I've got 3 questions left. I suspect I'm not going to be able to get to all 3 of them. So the relationship between Representative Swantek and DeCane, and the fact that Rob just did a piece about those two, they appeared on a piece of literature together that Representative DeCane put out. So I want to ask both of you who you're supporting in the House race between those 3 candidates. Ryan, I think it's an easier question for you to answer, quite frankly, than probably for George. So I apologize for that, George, but I think it's important. Ryan?
I think it's obvious. I love Steve. I work well with him. We have very similar ideas on everything. And obviously I support Hamida. Those are the 2 that I'm going to support for the whole entire thing. I think we work together. All 3 of us work together very well. And I want to continue that relationship. So yeah, it is an easy answer. So I'll keep it short.
George, same question for you.
Yeah, so I came here today to take some of the focus off of the battle royale that's going on down there. We got 3 people for the 2 spots. I'm glad we finally got to talk about the Senate race because Ryan and I have been feeling left out this whole time. So I've really been trying to focus on, what I'm doing, what Ryan's doing. We've been running actually a pretty positive race, even though there's a lot of things we don't agree on. And I'd kind of like to keep it that way, where the focus is on me and Ryan and letting the people sort out what they want to sort out in the House of Representatives and then choosing their senator the way they want to choose it. So, each of us, they can look and see what each of us stands for. Each of us is different, and the voters are going to get to pick what they like.
I'm glad Chad asked that question and not me.
You were gonna though, weren't you?
I was. I do want to ask a question. I live out west. I live in Minot, which obviously is not, we're on the edge of the oil patch, but we've seen it. The oil industry is hugely important to my part of the state, hugely important to the West. Really, it's important to the whole state. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The amount of revenue that the oil industry kicks off is funding a lot of the things that we've been talking about aren't possible without those revenues. So let me ask you that. I mean, what is your? I mean, we're kind of moving into an era where we're trying to adopt things like coal, things like oil, things like gas, and do it in ways that are compatible with some modern understandings about the climate. I think carbon capture and things like that. So we'll start with Ryan. What is your philosophy on that, understanding this employs a huge number of North Dakotans across the state. It kicks off an enormous amount of tax revenues. How do we find the right balance with these industries going forward?
That's a great question. I will continue to support the oil and gas industry to a point. I think we need to make sure that they are taxed appropriately and make sure that they're taxed just like everybody else. And we don't need to favor them. I think they're going to come and go as they please as the markets go, regardless of what we do at the state. I support us exploring ideas of carbon capture because I think it is something that is necessary to help our climate. However, I think we need to be very careful that we are following the science and not just what companies want. I believe that we need to also make sure we explore other options out there for energy needs. Like we need to explore nuclear energy as possible, subsidizing and even possibly replacing some of your older coal generating plants. Because if we could potentially convert some of those plants over and provide just the same amount of jobs, if not more jobs and more beneficial jobs in those regions, and not alienate the coal industry either. I think we need to look at, we may have potential for some rare earth minerals within our coal deposits that would help the battery industry across the state. I think we need to make sure we are looking at that and making sure that we continue to explore those ideas through our EEOC up in Grand Forks that has EERC. Yes, that was correct. Sorry. I knew it was some of those letters, but
Energy and Environmental Research Center. That's what it is.
Yes. But I think we need to make sure that we have an all above the approach. I don't think it's a solar versus coal versus wind versus everything. I think we need to diversify everything. Right now, it is working. Serving on the interim committee for energy and transmission was really an eye opener, and realizing that we need to be very careful closing coal plants because we may not have energy if we close some of those.
Right.
We need to be very careful on what we do with transitioning our energy sources off, because we could start having rolling blackouts if we do it too quickly. We need to make sure, but we need to do it in a conscious, scientific based way that will not what will keep us where we're at today, but also help improve our environment for the future generations to come. So I think we need to be very calculated and very conscious of those consequences.
George, same question to you.
Yeah, so, I agree with a lot of what he said. I was surprised that he said he's an all of the above guy, but we do have some data centers opening, and, we can't just keep things where they're at. We actually have to massively expand because a lot of the new opportunities are heavily based on electricity, the Bitcoin mining, stuff like that. So we're going to have to address that. And then as far as oil, coal, and gas, it seems like it's a matter of time. I can't tell the future, but I think the legacy fund and how responsible we've been with the money and the legislature, that doesn't happen in every state. It doesn't happen in every country where you actually get a group of people who are willing to save the money. I think that's something North Dakota needs to be proud of. I think that's our bridge to the future. And we got to make sure that the legacy fund stays intact, that it stays safe, that it's growing, and that we're not getting into it too soon and selling our future to fund the present.
Well, gentlemen, I don't really want to
Can I ask one final question?
Let's go, Chad.
This might be the most important question on Friday, October 25th, with the World Series starting this evening. You have a Yankees fan and a Dodgers fan moderating this debate. Yankees or Dodgers? Who wants to go first?
Oh, that's probably the toughest choice you can make, I guess. Boy, if you really make me choose, I guess I'd have to choose the Dodgers. I can't imagine ever rooting for the Yankees.
Oh, I am hurt, George. I am hurt and offended.
Ryan, any answer to the big question? Yankees, Dodgers.
I vehemently dislike the Yankees, so it's going to be the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's the lesser of two evils. I'm winning. This is like
it's kind of like the. I was just gonna say it's kind of like the national election. All right, I'm just saying. Anyway, we Yankees dine out on your guys' disdain. So
Rob's gonna edit that out.
I'm gonna edit that part out. No, I'm not. We don't edit these. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a delight. I have really enjoyed. I don't want to make this like this was different. I think every debate we've hosted this cycle really has been substantive. It's been civil. Everybody has come to the table. They're well informed. Obviously, we disagree what's the point of democracy if we didn't disagree? Right. But I'm so happy that you guys came on and did this. We're so happy to provide the venue for you. And I really enjoyed it. This was a good discussion.
Rob, I think in 2 years we should try to do a debate in every legislative race in the state, because this was so great. I mean, if you want to know where these candidates stand, they have an hour worth of material now. That's what we should be doing.
It would be nice. The problem is there's a lot of legislative races. It's tough to get to them all. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Send me an email at rport@forumcom.com. That's forumcom with 2 M's.com. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
For me and other young people like me,